My name is Keisha Ann Gilliam, and today I'll be presenting an overview of social anxiety disorder. By integrating a look into traditional diagnostics, cognitive mechanisms, innovative interventions, and social cultural perspectives. Let's explore how these diverse insights help us better understand social anxiety disorder and treat it. Social anxiety disorder isn't just about feeling shy. It's a condition marked by an intense fear of social situations, and for a lot of people, a constant worry about being negatively judged. This fear can disrupt personal relationships, academic performance, and just the overall quality of life for those affected. My presentation here today is built on a comprehensive literature review that aimed to weave together clinical diagnostic criteria, cognitive behavioral insights, digital media influences, and even cultural and religious perspectives. This information brings to light how diverse research can offer a fuller picture of this disorder. So with diagnostics and prevalence, we find that through the Diagnostic Standard Manual, edition 5, that criteria states that social anxiety is defined by persistent fear and avoidance of social scenarios, which causes impairment to just daily functioning. One interesting finding by a study done by Jeffries and Unger shows that nearly 1 in 3 young adults, that was their demographic is studying, aged 16 to 29 in that study, met the clinical threshold for social anxiety disorder. One interesting thing that I thought in this one is expanding that out and seeing the statistics for maybe a wider range. That's definitely an area that research could be expanded, and maybe also one other thing to expand on in future research is just the prevalence in different generations and then comparing their cultural norms and also just how much maybe religion also impacts that as well. It's just a personal takeaway from that section. Another fascinating thing is the cultural variability. Prevalence rates differ from country to country, reflects how social norms and demographic contexts shape the experience of those suffering with social anxiety, but also how they present themselves to the world. So delving a little deeper into the cognitive and behavioral mechanisms, which are at the core of this disorder, people with this often experience what they like to call dysfunctional thought patterns. So that means there tends to be an interpretation of social cues in a negative light, even if they're not aimed at being negative from the sender. The recipient takes those in, and their mind and just how their thoughts are processed can just sort of warp the information coming in. Research showed that neuroticism, which is kind of neurological criticism, increased social sensitivity and reduced tolerance for uncertainty, which was an indirect fueling for social anxiety disorder. On a positive side, though, interventions such as interpretation modification, demonstrated by research by Beard and Amar, demonstrated that we can actually retrain those negative biases and thus reduce anxiety and as a whole. And essentially, by understanding these cognitive vulnerabilities, we gain insight into more targeted and effective treatments. So moving on to treatment, a traditional approach is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which has remained the gold standard for treating this disorder. CBT focuses on challenging and restructuring negative thoughts while gradually exposing individuals to anxiety-provoking social situations. This approach not only addresses the symptoms but also equips patients with practical skills for managing anxiety. Some meta-analytic research supported the fact that CBT can lead to moderate to significant reductions in those symptoms, making it that marks it as a cornerstone of clinical practice. But it is a modern age, and we are in the age of digital devices. So, moving on to innovative approaches, a modern day approach, is something called VRET therapy, or virtual reality exposure therapy. Because of technology, it's really new technology has introduced exciting new treatment avenues. VRET immerses patients into stimulated social scenarios, offering a controlled way to confront and overcome their fears, while also retraining their minds. And it's something that can be used in combination with that previous traditional approach, which definitely is helpful, particularly beneficial for populations with specific challenges. In the research that I investigated for my review, it was specifically a study done on those who stutter. So they would be put into this VRET therapy to stimulate those scenarios where they would be most likely to stutter, and it showed significant reductions in those habits, and it definitely shows great promise for the future and social anxiety disorder treatment. Now, social media, on the other hand, is another one of those modern factors that plays a dual role, in particular. On one hand, it offers a platform for interconnection between countries, between cultures. Is kind of an astounding, very modern thing, but on the other hand, it can really exasperate and intensify those feelings, and it's even been shown to contribute to heightened prevalence of anxiety because of the perfectionism and the just images and just the persona that can be put out on media platforms. So it's a powerful reminder that while digital media can be a tool, it can also contribute to the very anxiety that it aims to alleviate with that spreading of those resources, because mental health has definitely been something that's been far more invested in recently. And moving right along, cultural and religious perspectives definitely enrich our understanding of social anxiety disorder. Understanding cultural norms and religious frameworks can enhance treatment, like the relevance of it and the effectiveness and just how it's tailored for each individual person. I think it's really cool that those biblical truths, as I actually discussed in my paper, because the Bible is an inerrant text, so it is truthful, that they can offer a narrative that counters modern culture and emphasizes peace and mindfulness through seeking the one who created us all. But also, it's very interesting, back to culture, what I discussed earlier about it presenting and the prevalence being different from country to country. This is also where I did find research on the indirect symptom presentation in certain Asian countries due to their cultural norms. So cultural norms definitely have a large effect on how social anxiety actually even manifests in certain individuals in certain cultures. So that was very intriguing. Now, and finally, and the final key here is the familial effect. Another, and its key factor in the fact that the influence of the family and early developmental experiences has been shown to have a significant effect on shaping emotional range and or skill set in later on years. Research here indicated that children raised in unsupportive or even hostile familial environments often struggled with emotion regulation. That early instability sets the stage for the development of social anxiety later in life. Understanding that impact of early relationships emphasizes the importance of intervention earlier on, and that a nurturing family dynamic are actually protective against leading these kids to having more vulnerabilities to developing this disorder later on. It all works together pretty seamlessly. Now, in integrating these findings, a clear picture emerges. Social anxiety disorder is a multifaceted condition. It requires a comprehensive treatment approach that spans diagnostic criteria, those mechanisms, those innovations like VRET, and even social and cultural, as well as family in the context of family. And despite progress, there are still gaps. Particularly, I think, just in science, there's always seems to be a need for more just long-term studies that just examine how factors change over time, and obviously that other one from the very first, just seeing the different age categories and the prevalence, and seeing if there's a significance to that, and also what the cultural norms at certain times have to do to contributing to a prevalence of it, or the lack thereof. My references page. So, in summary, social anxiety disorder is just not merely a collection of symptoms, but a complex interplay of all those things that we just discussed. Traditional treatments, as well as innovative approaches, show great promise in expanding the therapeutic toolkit that we have for this, and by embracing an integrative perspective, we can develop more personalized and effective interventions for those struggling with social anxiety. And I thank you for all your attention, and any questions are more than welcome. I hope this was informative. Good night.